Hi. How are everyone doing? So, it was a bit chilly in last GrafanaCon in Amsterdam. So that's one of the reasons we're here. One of the reasons we also made this beach towel. Be sure to grab it at the reception on your way out. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's new in version 6. But before that, I just want to kind of reiterate a little bit what we did last year in starting the year off by unveiling and launching Grafana V5 at GrafanaCon Amsterdam. And we had a pretty amazing conference and a pretty cool launch. V5 brought a ton of new features around the dashboard grid, teams, folders, provisioning. And during last year, we also did a bunch of point releases that brought a number of new enhancements and features. But I don't want to get into that because I have so much to talk about and show in terms of new stuff we're adding in V6. Starting with the new feature and concept Explore. We have a ton of new changes around panel editing and the workflows that goes into that. We have a new panel architecture. We have full built-in multi-cloud support, and we have done a ton of work around security. So let's dig into the first one, Explore, in a bit more detail. Explore is a completely new page, new concept in Grafana, separate from the dashboard, that allows you to explore metrics without kind of having all the dashboard context and panels and graph options available, just more focused around pure exploration and ad hoc queries. This is something that has been a top-rated kind of feature request and something we've been thinking about for many years. Is a way to sort of have a more focused query UI to do ad hoc queries. And a place where you can do quick comparisons between different queries, different time regions, and different data sources. A place where you can more easily do troubleshooting and handle incident response. A place where you can explore your logs. Let's take a look. So we're on the home dashboard, and in the side menu here, you can see a new icon, the new compass. Oh. Okay, it's moving. So let's jump into Explore. And you can see at the top here, we have a data source selection. Currently, we have a Prometheus data source. And in the sort of empty query state, you also get this kind of info sheet with some example queries. You can actually click these example queries and have the query field filled in. You will get a graph and a table. For Prometheus, the table will be an instant query, showing all the label values that the query returned. Prometheus also has, the new query editor has this label and name selection dropdown. The instant table below allows you kind of quick ad hoc filtering. So you can click on the label names, and that label filter will be applied to the query. And that way you can quite quickly filter down and narrow down the query. So that was a very quick look at Prometheus in Explore. But Explore is for every data source. So let's take a look at that again, this time with a graphite data source. And in this case, you will get the standard graphite query editor. And let's build a query. And in this case, we're going to actually build a tagged query. So if you didn't know, Graphite has full support for tagging. And this, of course, works beautifully in Grafana. So one of my absolute favorite features in Explore is the ability to split the view in two. So you get an identical kind of copy of the view on the right side. So let's take a look at that. So you can find the split feature in the top toolbar here. Let's hit the split button and split the view. Now you get a complete copy where you can tweak the query, change the time range, or even change the data source to compare, let's say, different graphite data sources, different environments, or maybe you want to compare metrics from graphite with some metrics or logs from Elasticsearch. And this is something that you can do in Explore. And this is kind of a much more efficient and easy way to do quick comparisons. Let's say to do the same in dashboard would take quite a time to build the panels and do this comparison. So Explore is kind of not a feature that lives in isolation. You can actually navigate to Explore from a dashboard panel. So let's take a look at that. Let's say this graphite carbon metrics graph here. You want to kind of look at the query, tweak the query maybe, or maybe do some comparison against a different environment. So you can, through the panel menu, jump directly to the Explorer view. And here we can split the query or split the view again, change the time range, or change the data source. So to talk about the other feature in Explore, I need to take a step back and talk about the fact that Grafana is kind of moving beyond metrics, and we're trying to build a complete observability stack. And many of our kind of other players in the space of observability has a stack, an acronym, like TIC or ELK. And we don't really have that in Grafana. So we started thinking about, can Grafana have an acronym as well? And we started thinking about this acronym we are using to accept or approve pull requests, LGTM, looks good to me. That could be a cool acronym. Could be logging, Grafana, tracing, metrics. And unlike kind of other sort of stacks, this would be a more open, composable stack that you could fit in different solutions into, different metrics backends, different logging backends. So this is what we're going to try to do. But when we started looking at logging specifically, we felt like there was a kind of hole in the market for a scalable, multi-tenant, efficient logging solution. So we decided to create a new open source project to fill this gap. And we announced Grafana Loki last year at PromCon, a multi-tenant, cloud-native log aggregation system. Tagline is like Prometheus, but for logs. I'm not going to go into great detail on Grafana Loki, as we have a talk later on by Tom Wilkie and David Kalsmich that will go into much more detail on Loki and Explore. But I do say that I'm super excited about the kind of interest and attention that Loki has gotten. And I'm so excited that I also want to show you a little bit of Loki and logs in Grafana. Sorry to steal your thunder a little bit, Tom, but I can't let this kind of talk go without showing this. Okay, so we're in Explore. We have a Prometheus query. And this Prometheus query has two label filters for an instance and for the job or the application name. And what we're going to do now is we're going to switch to the Loki data source, and those label filters will be preserved. So we're going to look at logs for that particular instance and application. You see here our kind of new logs visualization in Explore, where you see a timeline of the log entries and the log entries themselves. The log entries also has kind of an ad hoc analytics feature where you can look at different keywords in the log message and get some quick statistics. Of course, you can do sort of search and narrow down the log query, and you get highlights for matches. So that was a very quick look at Explore. We're going to go into great detail in a later talk, as I mentioned. Don't sort of miss that. It's after the break, before lunch. Next up on what's new in v6 that I want to talk about is the new panel architecture. And to start this off, I want to give you some context and go back a few years to 2013, when Grafana as a front end, as a web UI, has its origins. So this is actually 6 years ago, which is kind of an eternity for web frameworks, JavaScript frameworks, that kind of rise in popularity and fall every year. And back then, a framework called AngularJS was super popular. And it quickly became unpopular as new frameworks that was much more efficient and much more easier to use became popular. So AngularJS, a framework from Google, was kind of abandoned. Google created a new framework, also called Angular, that is very different. And it's not as popular, and it's not something that we wanted to migrate to. But in 2017, we decided to migrate to React. And this was kind of a big decision. It would involve a lot of rewriting, basically rewriting the whole front end. And the reason for this is that we view Grafana as a long-term project. We want to stay relevant. We want to have a modern code base. We want to attract talented front-end developers for many more years. So this ended up us kind of spending a lot of time this last 1.5 years on migrating and rewriting a lot of the front end in React and trying to do some UI improvements along the way. But so a couple of sort of big components were missing, or big pieces that we yet had to tackle. And this was kind of in the middle of last year. We started thinking about how are we going to do panels and query editors and basically all the plugin components in React. This would require some pretty big changes, and we wanted to do something new, something modern, and sort of kind of try to learn from all the mistakes and problems with the Angular panel architecture when we kind of approach this new architecture. Some of the things we wanted to improve was separate the visualizations from the panel to make them more reusable, and so we could use the same visualization in many different panels and in many other contexts like Explore. We also wanted to separate more the panel from the query execution and the dashboard, so a panel plugin could be also used in other contexts that we haven't invented yet. And we wanted to fundamentally improve Grafana as a platform for developers and plugin sort of authors and other companies sort of building custom integrations with Grafana. So this was all going to require some really big changes. And I also kind of wanted to make some UI changes. If we were going to end up rewriting a lot of the core dashboard and panel code, I wanted to make some substantial improvements to the workflows around panel editing. Specifically, I wanted to make it possible to change panel type. So I think everyone here is familiar with the kind of add panel widget, where you select your panel type. This is kind of the first step in adding a new panel to a dashboard. And this choice gets locked in. You cannot change it after the fact. Even though you might sort of realize that this panel might make more sense as a heat map or a single stat, you can't make that choice. Or even if you just want to quickly switch to a table to look at the raw values and switch back, you cannot do that without kind of deleting the panel and starting over. We also wanted to make some big UI changes or improvements to the whole edit UI to make it a little bit more easier to know where options are located and to make it less confusing. So we started thinking about, okay, how can we do this? Changing panel type, improving the layout around the panel edit, user interface, and settings. Turns out UX and UI is really, really hard, at least in my view. And of course, we approached this from mock-ups, and we had some basic ideas to start with. We know we wanted to simplify the structure a bit, to have a queries tab where all your queries and related options live. We know we wanted to have a visualization tab where the panel type and panel selection was located, and all the options related to your specific panel type was also located. So that was kind of some of the basics. And we tried many mock-ups of this. We tried proof of concept implementations in the actual application. We got sidetracked because we found an problem with the side menu, and we wanted to try to move the side menu to the top, which we really liked, but we kind of took a pause on that and moved back to, okay, we need to focus on panel editing. And we tried some crazy things, like kind of moving the tabs to the top. Yeah, that was stupid, but sometimes you need to try stupid things as well. You never know. Anyway, I could show you kind of mock-up of the mock-up of the mock-up, or after sort of in-app sort of proof of concept implementation as well. And we kind of tried again, went home, cried a bit, and tried again. So why am I showing you all this? Well, I figured it'd be interesting to kind of see the process that we do when we kind of make a change like this, and how we kind of really want to push ourselves to make something great. It's not super obvious, kind of all the hard work and all the discarded work and kind of failed ideas that kind of are left in the dustbin to make a change like this. I think it also kind of highlights the fact that we're kind of never happy with the state of Grafana. We're always trying to look at ways to make it better. It might sound kind of negative to say that I'm never happy with how Grafana is, but to me, kind of it's the reason I get to work in the morning. It's the reason I love working on Grafana, to find all the ways that we can make Grafana better, and to make every sort of major release of Grafana feel more polished and easier to use. It's such a kind of exciting challenge, not just kind of add a bunch of new features, but actually make the fundamentals better. So let's take a look at the new Edit UI. So in a second, the guy behind the demo is going to move the mouse to the, okay, now, and edit this panel. And so now we're in the new edit mode. You can see that we actually hide the application side menu. And we have a kind of a little bit easier way to navigate back, more traditional back arrow to go back to the dashboard. And the horizontal tabs is kind of replaced with a vertical icon tabs. The metrics tab is renamed to queries, as we kind of felt that was more appropriate. And we have the visualization tab. And this is where the current panel choice is selected, and you also have all the options related to your current panel type. And if you have a lot of options, like the graph has, you can scroll down to see all of them. But the main thing here is, of course, to be able to change panel type as well. So you can open the panel or visualization selection, and here quickly just cycle through some different visualizations. And a really important point here is that all your panel-specific options are going to be preserved. So if I go to the graph here and change, for example, the fill ratio here, and go to single stat and then back to graph, that option is going to be preserved. You're never going to lose your panel-specific options just because you want to kind of quickly jump to the table panel to look at the raw data and then back. Your graph options are still going to be kind of preserved. Moving on, the general tab is pretty much similar to what it was before. It still contains the title, description, repeating, and drill down links. We tried a lot to kind of improve the way you edit the title, to edit the title directly in the panel title. And also we tried ways to be able to edit it at the top, but didn't find something that really worked there, so it's still kind of an unsolved UI puzzle. The alert tab is pretty much the same as before. We moved the side menu to a kind of a toolbar buttons here at the top, but otherwise it's very similar. So Just a quick, going through some of the quick changes we did on the metrics tab that we kind of renamed to queries. We felt like the time range did not deserve to be its own tab. It should really be inside the queries tab, as that time range overrides are really relevant for the queries you write. We also felt like the data source options that we collapse here, they are kind of the min intervals or max data points are really important options that shouldn't be hidden. We also felt like the row menu here also kind of hide really important and frequently used actions like toggle the editor mode. So this is the new UI. We have the actions up top like add query and query inspector. And here we have the new kind of query row actions. So actions like moving and duplicating and toggling edit mode is now not hidden in a menu anymore, and it's more easily accessible. And the pen icon there that toggles the edit mode, this is something that a lot of query editors have. They have a UI builder mode and a free text edit mode. And being able to quickly toggle between them is very useful. And it's also actually something that Grafana used to have. So this is a screenshot from Grafana version 1.5. So here you can see the pen icon for the Graphite query editor. So I'm pretty sure that a lot of people will be kind of happy with the return 4 years later. You can also see that we have now moved the time range override options into the queries tab. And we're also now exposing the data source specific options like max data points and min interval directly here. Moving on. I'm not sure if you noticed, but we have a new panel in version 6.0. It's not really a new visualization, but it's a new panel. And the reason we're introducing a new gauge panel is that we really wanted a panel to be a test bed for our new React panel architecture. And we wanted something simple as well. So we figured the gauge would be a good fit. And we also wanted it sort of to move the gauge feature out of the single stat into its own kind of separate visualization, its own separate panel. And when we started working on the gauge panel, we also wanted to really improve on the UI for configuring the gauge panel, and specifically configuring the thresholds. So I'm pretty sure all of you have seen the kind of the threshold editor for single stat and table, where you specify a lower bound and upper bound in this kind of CSV string, and you can only specify 2 and 3 colors. A lot of users struggle with this, rightly so. It's not very intuitive. So we did something similar here. We tried a bunch of different mock-ups and ideas, and this is what we kind of ended up with. So let's take a look at the new gauge panel and the new threshold editor. So let's pick the new gauge panel here. And the gauge options look a little bit different, as this is using our React components for kind of selecting things like unit. So they look a little bit different from their Angular counterparts. The new gauge panel is also a little bit smarter. It doesn't have a font size option. It will automatically kind of adjust the font size to optimize kind of the size based on how long the value is. But let's move to the right here and take a look at the threshold editor. So here you can specify an infinite number of thresholds. We have a kind of a base color, and the first threshold is 80. If I add a new one, it kind of get automatically assigned a value and a color. And I can add more in between here. And if I change the value, so say like 10, it's going to automatically sort down below here. And we can also take a look at the new color picker that we're introducing in version 6. This color picker is used everywhere and supports kind of named colors and these kind of primary colors as well, which is going to make it a little bit easier to make your colors more consistent across your dashboards. And of course, the gauge panel will support everything that the single stat panel does, like value mapping. The plan is to kind of have single stat and the gauge sort of have exactly the same options, and you can sort of toggle between them, and the options are going to be preserved there as well. There's a big sort of thing that we didn't get into 6.0 that was kind of one of the payoffs of the new React panel architecture, where data kind of flows in to the visualization in a much kind of easier to use way. So there was one thing that we wanted to do that we didn't have time with that we're doing in version 6.1, and that is supporting a way to repeat visualizations for every time series. So before, we had this feature called repeat panels that allowed you to kind of define a variable that maybe did a query to fill its values, and then you could select the panel and repeat that panel for every value in the variable. But the problem here is that if I set kind of this dashboard to auto refresh, it's going to issue 16 separate network requests and 16 separate queries to your time series backend, which is not a very efficient way to show a dashboard like this. And also kind of cumbersome to set up in that you have to specify or create this variable. So that's why I'm really excited about the concept of being able to repeat single stat visualizations and other visualizations just by just adding a wildcard to your query. And by doing that, if you have a query that returns many series, it's going to automatically kind of repeat itself. And this is very early, so we just started experimenting with this a week ago, so there's still a ton of work to be done, like sort of adding the series name to these visualizations. We're also experimenting with a new bar gauge panel that I'm really excited about. This is also super early. We are kind of just did a proof of concept in a few hours of this panel last week to really test bed kind of the concept of repeating visualizations. But I'm really excited about kind of the payoff of what we've done in 6.0 in terms of this React architecture to be able to support use cases like this. And I'm kind of excited as well about the bar gauge because it's a panel that I've been wanting to do for a long time. So I even sort of hacked up a cool thing on the plane here, a way to show the bar gauge using LCD cells, which is pretty nice as it can kind of visualize the thresholds in the unlit cells. And this was super early, just proof of concept stuff. But hopefully we can get something like this into 6.1 or 6.2. So I wanted to get back to this concept of, or this goal rather, to fundamentally improve Grafana as a platform for developers, and for kind of all the companies that have invested in Grafana by developing custom data sources and custom panels. We wanted to sort of make sure that Grafana stays relevant in this space as well, and we have a really nice story around kind of developing external plugins. And that's why I'm super now sort of happy and proud to announce Grafana UI, our new sort of UI library that is going to enable this. So Grafana UI is a React UI component library for internal and external plugins, a library that we will publish to NPM. It will come sort of with rich TypeScript typing, and we'll also publish documentation and examples of how to use this. So just to give you a quick taste of what this means, it's a library that you can install, and if you sort of, when you're developing plugins, you can then import types and components directly and get kind of full IntelliSense and type information in your code editor. So this is showing a simple text panel or simple React panel, and we're importing a type here, panel props, from the Grafana UI library. And if you just click on this panel props interface, we can get full information on what type of data and properties Grafana will send to the panel, like panel data. Okay, what does that include? Well, it includes a time series and a table type. Previously, a lot of this stuff was kind of, you needed to reverse engineer, look at other plugins to be able to figure out what kind of properties and data Grafana would provide plugins. You can also see that we are exporting this React panel here. And this is also fully typed, and we could sort of explore what more we could do with a React panel. And your editor will give you kind of full intelligence here, saying, okay, you can set defaults for this panel. Interesting. And you can set that editor. And if you look at that function, you can also sort of see, okay, this function will take a specific component with this particular interface. So you'll get a ton of help right from the code editor of how to develop plugins with Grafana UI. And lastly, you can, of course, import from Grafana UI our core visualizations and reuse them in your panel plugins. You could import the gauge, the graph, or the threshold editor. If you want to use the same threshold editor we use, you can use that in your own panel plugins. Yeah, super excited about Grafana UI and what it will enable in the future. So for more on that, check out the workshop on extending Grafana tomorrow. So just to reiterate a little bit what I've been talking about recently is that a lot of the work in 6.0 is about investing in the future, modernizing the code base, and modernizing the platform for plugins. And I know I'm going to get a question on this. All this work is fully backward compatible. We still support Angular panels and Angular query editors. Many of the panels in Grafana are still kind of written in Angular, and we will keep being backward compatible for some time. So no worries there. Lastly, I have two more things to mention on v6, and that's kind of v6 is the first time that Grafana launches or kind of comes bundled with official built-in core data sources for all the three major cloud vendors, which is kind of a data source for Microsoft Azure, a data source for Google Stackdriver, and a data source for Amazon CloudWatch. I'm really happy with kind of the partnership with Google and Microsoft to bring you these two latest data sources. It's so common these days that you have in-house data sources, or in on-prem data from Prometheus or Graphite, mixed with some kind of cloud data that you have running in Azure or Stack or in Google Cloud. So being able to sort of have a single pane of glass to visualize your metrics is really cool. Lastly, we have done a ton of work on the backend as well in version 6 around security. We had a few security issues, or one security issue last year around the Remember Me cookie, and this kind of prompted us to really invest in improving the security overall for the kind of session and login management. So that's what we've done in v6. We've totally rewritten how logins are kind of authenticated, or how a login state is authenticated through a new auth token system, which kind of replaces completely the need for a session store and the Remember Me cookie. So check, if you're interested in security, you can read more about this in the release notes. So I'm super proud to announce that Grafana 6.0 was released earlier today. Not only is 6.0 kind of fully packed with new features and new concepts like Explore and a ton of UI improvements and new panels and data sources, but it also lays a really solid foundation for really cool features that is going to come later this year. So I want to end with a bunch of big thanks, especially to the Grafana team. I'm super proud of kind of what they've done in this release and how we've grown over the years, and the amazing kind of hard work they put into this release. And of course, I want to thank all our contributors that have opened even more pull requests last year and more bug reports and feedback. Without that, Grafana would not be a healthy open source project. So super thankful to everyone who opens a PR, opens a bug report, submits some kind of feedback. It's crucial. So until next time, have a great conference. and check out Grafana v6.
Eric is curious if the Grafana UI library is already being used within Grafana itself.
Yes, of course. So I mean, the purpose around Grafana UI is as much about kind of enabling and empowering the internal development as well as empowering and enabling external development. So it's sort of everything in Grafana UI is being used in Grafana itself. And it makes it so much easier to sort of maintain as well. And so, yeah.
Awesome. Another question is this transition from Angular to React. Instead, it started in 2017. How's that going? I mean, refactoring such a large project like Grafana, and how long do you think that's going to take to complete?
Well, it's been going better than I expected. So there's no real interoperability between them, but we have found a way to sort of make the migration piece by piece. And I would say sort of for all the major pages, they are almost all in React. The biggest things are not in React is the actual panels themselves. So that's kind of where we are right now. When we have the new panel architecture, we can now start to really migrate the panels themselves and make improvements to them.
Very cool. And how soon, question from Sarah is, I think this is related to the compatibility, question from Christoph, is his version 5 dashboards, will they just work on version 6?
Yes, I mean, Grafana has always had a sort of big focus on backward compatibility. We always want you to be able to upgrade and be sure that your dashboards look the same, and that's going to be still remain true for version 6.
So everyone who upgrades from Grafana 5 to 6 can give you a buzz personally if there's any problems. Gotcha. Cool, cool. Any plans for, sort of a Grafana UI equivalent library for data source plugins? Question from Neil.
Yeah, I mean, it is going to be used for data source plugins as well. So it already contains some of the interfaces for being able to do React query editors, but there are some missing components and missing pieces. But we are just kind of getting started on actually porting some of our data sources and query editors to React as well. But yeah, it's something we will do over time, and there are going to be examples for how to do that with Grafana UI as well.
Awesome. And what about drill down panels? Is that something we're thinking about, or is there any thoughts around that? A couple of people are asking about sort of how soon. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely on the top of our mind is to improve the ability to drill down, especially through the single stat and repeating visualizations. It makes perfect sense to be able to have a repeating single stat or gauge or bar gauge and be able to click on one of them and have that kind of be drilled down into another dashboard or set the variable on the dashboard. So we're looking at that as kind of the next step, possibly as well being able to drill down through the graph legend.
Awesome. And I think last question is, with regards to the alerting improvements in version 6, alerting only works with graphs panels right now. Are there any plans to extend alerting supports to work with, say, single stat or gauge panels?
Yeah, this is probably one of the top-rated issues on GitHub.
So then there's plans?
It's still, we're kind of now sketching out the next gen, truly kind of big leap forward for the alerting story in Grafana. And until we have that locked down, I'm not sure. So we are planning to sort of make some big changes to alerting. But if the next sort of phase will continue to mean that we have alerting in panels and dashboards, then it makes perfect sense to add it to single step. But we're just kind of exploring it right now, what the next big steps are.
Gotcha, cool. So many questions, but I guess we'll do one last one. So any plans, question from Sheriff is, the repeat feature seems cool, but can you explain a little bit more about how the repeat feature can help with reducing network requests?
Yeah, if it wasn't clear, I mean, if you have a single query or multiple queries that are being batched in one request, as long as it returns many time series or many table rows, Grafana will be able to kind of repeat the same visualization for every time series or every table row. So my example was there are 16 panels that cost 16 different requests. That could be reduced to two requests because there were two different visualizations. So that.
Awesome. So not just network requests, but I guess load on your database.
Yeah,
absolutely. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Torkel, I've already told you this in a non-public setting, but awesome job on V6, and I'm really psyched to get it out today. So everyone, please give a warm hand for Torkel. Cheers, dude.